Every night, he played beneath the willow tree for the woman who could no longer hear. The old man, whose name was Arthur, would bring a worn wooden stool and his even more worn violin to the park as dusk settled. His audience was a single, silent figure on a bench, his wife, Elara. Alzheimer's had stolen her memories, her words, and eventually, the very sounds of the world. But Arthur believed, with every fiber of his being, that music could find a way through the fog. He'd set up his stool, rosin his bow, and take a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and willow leaves filling his lungs. Then, he'd begin to play. Not grand concertos or complex sonatas, but the simple tunes they had shared throughout their 60 years together. The melody from their first dance at a village fair. A lullaby he'd hummed to their children. The soaring theme from the first movie they ever saw. Each note was a memory, a story whispered into the quiet evening air. Passers-by would often stop, drawn by the hauntingly beautiful music. They'd see the old man, his eyes closed in concentration, his body swaying gently, lost in the world he was creating. They'd see the woman on the bench, her gaze distant, her hands resting peacefully in her lap. Some would smile sadly, others would wipe away a tear, but no one ever interrupted. It was a sacred space, a concert for two, performed under the watchful branches of the ancient willow. One evening, a young woman with a camera sat on a nearby bench, filming the scene. She was a journalism student, always looking for a story. At first, she saw only a poignant, picturesque moment. An old man, his music, his silent wife. But as she watched, night after night, she began to see more. She saw the way Arthur would gently tuck a blanket around Ilara's shoulders when a cool breeze rustled the leaves. She saw how he'd pause between songs to tell her about his day. His voice, soft and steady, as if she were listening to every word. "The roses in the garden are finally blooming, my love," he'd say. "The red ones you always liked. They're a bit unruly this year, just like you used to say. I was." He'd chuckle, a low, rumbling sound, and Mrs. Gable from next door brought over a lemon drizzle cake. "Tasted almost as good as yours." Almost. He'd never wait for a reply. He didn't need one. He was simply keeping their conversation alive, a monologue of love against a backdrop of silence. The young journalist, whose name was Chloe, finally worked up the courage to speak to him after he'd carefully packed away his violin and was helping Elara to her feet. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice hesitant. "Your music, it's beautiful." Arthur turned, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, his eyes kind. "Thank you, young lady. I'm just trying to remind her of the good times." He nodded toward Elara, who stood patiently by his side. Chloe asked if she could tell their story. Arthur was hesitant at first. Their life was private, their ritual personal, but then he looked at Elara, at the blankness in her eyes, and he thought about all the memories locked away inside her. "Maybe," he said slowly, "maybe a story is just another kind of song, and maybe some people need to hear it." So, he agreed. He told Chloe everything. He told her about meeting Elara when they were just teenagers, how he'd stumbled over his own feet trying to impress her. He told her about his proposal, right under this very willow tree, when he was so nervous he almost dropped the ring in the grass. He described the day he bought his first violin, saving up for months, because Elara had told him she loved the sound of string music. She said it sounded like a heart singing, he recalled, a faint smile on his lips. "So I learned to make my heart sing for her." He spoke of the early days of her illness, the forgotten keys, the repeated questions, the frustration and fear. He talked about the day she no longer recognized him, a pain so sharp it had nearly broken him. "I came home from the shop," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and she looked at me with such fear. She asked who I was, what I was doing in her house. In our house." He paused, taking a shaky breath. That was the day the music stopped. For a long time, for months, the house was silent. Arthur felt lost, adrift in a sea of grief. He'd packed the violin away, its silence mirroring the emptiness in his life. But then, one afternoon, as he was sitting with Elara in the garden, a small finch landed on the fence and began to sing a cheerful, trilling song. Ilara, who hadn't reacted to anything in weeks, turned her head slightly. Toward the sound, a flicker of something, perhaps curiosity, crossed her face for just a second. It was fleeting, but it was there. That was the moment Arthur remembered. Music. Their shared language. He'd rushed to the dusty attic, retrieved the violin case, and that very evening, he'd brought his stool and his wife to the willow tree. He didn't know if she could hear, not in the way we understand it. But he played anyway. He played because of a finch's song. He played because of a flicker in her eyes. He played because hope, like music, can find its way into the quietest of rooms. Chloe published her story, complete with a short video of Arthur playing his violin. It went viral overnight. People from all over the world were touched by the tale of the man who made his heart sing for the woman who could no longer hear. Donations poured in for Alzheimer's research. Messages of support and love flooded the comments section. But for Arthur, none of that really mattered. His world was still right here, under the willow. One evening, a few weeks after the story broke, Arthur was playing one of their favorite. The melody was light and joyful, a stark contrast to the melancholy air. He was deep in the music, his eyes closed, his soul pouring through the strings. As the final, long note hung in the air, he felt a faint pressure on his hand. He opened his eyes. Ilara's hand, frail and spotted with age, was resting on his. Her gaze was still distant, her expression unchanged, but her thumb, ever so slightly, was stroking the back of his hand. Once, twice. Tears streamed down Arthur's weathered cheeks, falling silently onto the dark wood of his violin. He didn't know if it was a reflex, a coincidence, or a message from somewhere deep inside her. A memory breaking through the fog. It didn't matter. For the first time in years, she had reached for him, and in that single, simple touch, Arthur heard an entire symphony. The song wasn't over. It had just found a new harmony. He raised his bow, smiled through his tears, and began to play again, his heart singing louder than ever before. Thank you for watching. If you or someone you know is affected by Alzheimer's or dementia, remember that support is available. You can find resources and help through organizations like the Alzheimer's Association. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that matter. Take care.